Digital 410 Productions and the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast are proud to invite you to the special online event.
A new Library of America volume presents 3 powerful first-hand accounts of World War II by veterans of the Pacific War who lived to tell their stories. E.B. Sledge, Samuel Hines, and Alvin Kernan. Volume editor Elizabeth D. Samet, professor of English at West Point, joins historian Richard B. Frank to discuss what makes these memoirs classics of the modern literature of war. This free online event will be Wednesday, March 16th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. World War II Memoirs, The Pacific Theater, a conversation with Elizabeth D. Samet and Richard B. Frank.
To find more information on this event and to register, go to LOA.org or WTSP WorldWar2.com.
Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Dodd Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
Welcome everybody to another episode, forget that, a special episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast. And it's another Monday night, but it's a special Monday night, and we are all excited to be here. Joining us, as always, Jeff Copsetta and one Henry Sledge. Gentlemen, how you all doing tonight?
Doing good. Doing well.
Can you hear me, Henry?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're doing well. I guess
good.
to kick it off, let's just go ahead and intro our special guest. And I can't think of no better way of doing it than playing a little sounder, if you will.
Sir, coming across that airfield today, I've never been more scared in my entire life.
And we're all afraid. All of us. The man who isn't scared out here is either a liar or dead.
History is full of wars fought for 100 reasons. But this war, our war, well, I want to believe. I have to believe that every step across that airfield, every man that's wounded, every man I lose, that it's all worthwhile because our cause is just. Of course, if a just cause came with some hot food and cold water, then it'll be okay too.
Rest up, boys.
Thought you might need that.
Thank you, sir.
Henry, would you like to do the honors, sir?
Yeah. Folks, really happy to have with us tonight my good friend, the actor portraying Captain Haldane in the Pacific miniseries. You just heard him in that iconic scene. So, Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for inviting me.
I got to just say real quick, I'm so excited you're here. I get an opportunity to do something I never do on this show, which is to go to my DVD collection, and pull out a DVD, and here it is. Lucky number 11. Fantastic.
11.
Lucky number 11. This is a fantastic movie, and when I heard you're coming on, I was like, Pacific, Pasha. Let's pull out quality films.
When was that, Scott? When was Lucky 11?
06?
Oh, I think we filmed it in 2005 or
So right
four,
before the
like
Pacific then?
Couple of years, yeah. It was.
Okay.
I remember getting recognized for it when we were filming in Australia, in Port Douglas, and some guy serving me a beer at a bar. You know, I'm on the patio. It's like, "Ah, mate, I recognize you, and you in the show." Or, yeah. He's listing. He's like, "Where did I know you from?" And listed a bunch of projects, and then he's like, "No, the movie I know you from was called The Wrong Man." What? I wasn't in a movie called The Wrong Man. And then he explained to me what it was, and I'm like, "You mean Lucky Number 11?" So for some reason in Australia, that movie is called The Wrong Man.
I think they do that from time to time. You'll hear like Japanese releases or like German releases will just have, I guess maybe they feel like a name change will better suit that market. And so you hear that from time to time where movies will have a little bit different name. But
Burger King's not Burger King in Australia either.
What is it? Whopper House?
The wrong burger.
Wrong burger?
The wrong burger. No, they don't like any business that's got, anything related to the king or queen in it. So they it's called something else.
That makes perfect sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Don't want to stand by the queen or the king. So
that intro just brought me back to that night we filmed it there.
Now,
I was talking to Joe.
We'll get into how you got into the Pacific and all that, but since we're on the topic, what is your method for getting into a role or a scene such as that? Like I said, I did a little bit of background work on the streaming series, The Right Stuff, and just watching the main actors. Some of them just sit in a corner, wait for them to say action. Some of them are pacing the floor, doing their lines over the head. Everybody kind of has their own method to getting into that scene, getting into that character. And that's a pretty rough scene and a straightforward scene. How did you go about prepping for that particular scene? Do you remember?
Well, we'd been at it for so long at that point. That was the last one that we filmed, actually.
Really?
First did. Yeah, for me, it was 5 and then 5, 7, and then 6. So by that point, you were just so entrenched. And I believe as we shot it, it was pretty much in sequence. So we'd already crossed the airfield, done all that. And just the setup, the sets themselves put you just right into it. They spared nothing in how they created those sets. So I was also very tired. And I couldn't imagine how tired the skipper would have been at that point. So all that just played right into how I did it. And it was very easy at that point to sink into character and do those scenes.
Yeah, it's amazing to think, how tired they were, how hot it was, dehydrated, how heavy everything is back then, all the gear, and just being in that environment for so long and fear for your life and all the things they're witnessing, and just, it's just mind-boggling when you try to even put yourself there.
Yeah, and so many takes to do it, and it takes about a day just to do that one scene. And if things mess up, and there was actually when we were filming that, there's kangaroos jumping in the background. But these kangaroos were jumping over, just like big, great big shell holes in the ground, and you're like, yeah, cut. Yeah, we got another kangaroo jumping through there. But that, the airfield, everything, I think it was pretty accurate in terms of the size of the airfield, the building, the specs on it were just bang on. And so there wasn't anything in your vision. On the ground, there's shells and there's rocks and stuff people would never see, kind of thing. And that was where we shot in far north. That was down near Melbourne in the Uyangs. So it was a rock quarry. So the Iwo set was there, Peleliu was there, Okinawa was there, and the second half of episode 5, as we were approaching the airfield, it just a massive set. Like you had to, from base camp, it took you 10 minutes just to drive to where you had to shoot.
I think out of a lot of the jobs on a movie set, I think these set production people are one of the most overlooked when it comes to the general public. As you were just saying, those shell casings on the ground and just the amount of effort that goes into creating that set, even though there's so much stuff that the movie goer or the TV goer will never see, but they just put that much effort into it. They don't get half the credit they deserve, I think.
No, absolutely not. A fantastic crew there in Australia. The makeup department, Kira Tripathi, the head makeup, she won an Emmy or Golden Globe, actually, I think, for the makeup. The amount of detail that went into just that and everything related to the uniform, the webbing, any type of equipment you had to touch. all the hills there were fake.
Yeah.
So they brought in train cars, and then they built like with a wooden frame over top, and then this like special kind of paper mache stuff over top, overlaid that, and planted trees and bodies, and you just like, really?
Wow.
But each one I think was about 25 million.
Wow.
Each episode.
Now, when it came to shooting the scenes, did the director kind of, at that point, I guess any of the scenes for that matter, do they pretty much have an idea of what they want the scene to look like? Or is it one of the situations where they're shooting the same scene over and over from every angle just so they have plenty of B-roll to choose from when they're doing the final edit? Do you remember shooting the same scene from multiple angles, or do they just have an idea what angle they want? You just go through it?
A little bit of both. There's certainly very well planned out, and because it was on 35 millimeter, everything was shot 35. So the setups took a long time. We were on a French hour schedule, so it was, for the actors, it was a 10-hour straight shoot. So you didn't take an hour off for lunch. Just about halfway through, you sit down for 20 minutes, eat, and you're back at it. I can't say there was a ton of coverage in terms of, we're going this, and then we're going this, and then we're going this. I think, as you see when you watch it, trying to keep it pretty open, take in everything, take in the other men, and of course there's a lot of close-up stuff, but each guy obviously had a vision about it and worked a little bit differently. And I think probably for me, the best experience I had was F6 with Tony Toh directing.
I think.
Who
Go ahead.
Was
Henry.
it Carl Franklin who directed episode 5?
Carl did 5, yeah. I mean, I had
so
the
Tony Toh did 6.
6, and Tim Van Patten did 7. Tim did 1, 7, and 9. And then Tim Van Patten did kind of a final edit of the whole package and passed that off to Playtone.
You were talking about the web gear earlier, and I think Jeff can agree with me on this, being a living historian. One of the things I appreciate about the series is the fact that as the timeline went, so did the uniforms. So in the Guadalcanal scenes, they got the Holly liners on there, and they got the early white shirts and the P-41s and the appropriate weapons. And as the show progresses and the campaigns move along, as the gear would have been issued through the timeline, you actually saw that gear showing up in the miniseries. And people being in the living history community and the World War II reenacting communities, a lot of them are so fickle on uniforms and authenticity on that. I think a lot of people really appreciate the fact that they had it just about as right as you can expect a production of that level to get it right during the actual timeline throughout the campaigns.
Yeah, actually, before I'd even got on camera and checking out, uniform, the webbing in my helmet, and they had the Eagle Globe and Anchor on it, and I did not want that on there because I was the only guy that had it. Now, from production perspective, they needed to sort of differentiate who's who, and if I guess Haldane has that. I almost ripped it off before we started shooting because I thought, this guy gets shot in the head, and he wouldn't have had that on there. Also, with I had a shoulder holster with the 45, and you see pictures of Haldane. A couple of them I saw when he was on Pavuvu, and he had a sidearm. Yeah. And I felt actually running around with that and having the 45 kind of flying around and everything else I had to do. I'd have preferred to have it as a sidearm like he did. But those are, production choices that they had to make as opposed to it being, purely accurate. So you live with it.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past, Henry and Jeff and I, about the fact that, his father's character carried a revolver instead of the 1911 that he carried in real life. And that's just one of those production decisions that was made. How did you go about studying for your role? Did you go back and just read everything you could up on Captain Haldane, or did you have a little bit of interest in World War II prior to landing this role?
Definitely prior interest, a little bit about the Pacific. My grandfather, my mom's father, was in the Navy, Canadian Navy. He captained 9 different ships during the Second World War. He sunk 2 subs. So, you know, from the get-go as a kid, following what I knew about him and history in general, when I got the role, they sent a package of everything about the Pacific War, the 1st Marine Division, and most beneficial to me was Andy's letters that he wrote back to the dean of Bowdoin. He was close with the dean of his college, and he was very close with the football coach. He graduated and he went back to Bowdoin for a year to coach, and then joined the Marines. So these letters go from Guadalcanal to Peleliu, you know, close to just before he died. And, you know, in them, he's not saying details about battles per se, but he spoke a lot about his men, you know, his attitude towards them, about them, how proud of them he was, how great they were, you know, how if a man was a guy who was difficult or complained, you know, it was a big issue, obviously, but there weren't too many of them. So I was able to crawl into his head a bit in terms of how he would relate to his men. And that helped me tremendously. I had a conversation with Steve Moore, his nephew. I had a nice long conversation with him. And I told him, I said, man, these are some big boots to fill, Andy Haldane. And he's like, yeah, but, you know, Andy wouldn't say that. You know, don't think of it that way. You know, I mean, you got the job, you're the guy, and, you know, just go and do it, go do your best. And so I did.
I just want to stop real quick. For those of you watching at home, if you don't mind, I want to throw out our text line. If you guys have any questions, feel free to text or you can give us a call. That phone number is 239-299-2132. Jeff or Henry, if you guys have a question, please step in. I don't want to monopolize this conversation.
Jump in there, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm you know, I've been spending the past 10 or 15 minutes trying to not act like such a groupie. So I'm just kind of holding everything in.
Group away, Jeff. Group away.
In fact, we're gonna have to have a quick wardrobe change. Hang on, just a second. We're gonna be talking about.
Oh, there it is.
I haven't worn this one in a little bit, and it's funny because I just stuck this on here before.
Yeah.
I typically don't. But no, Don really kind of hit it on the head. My biggest question to you was, you know, knowing what I know of Captain Haldane, and I told these guys when I heard that you were going to be on that, you know, there was 2 guys that served in the Pacific that I would have loved to portray, and one was Sergeant Mike Strank, who was one of the flag raisers on Iwo. Barry Pepper's character, who Flags of Our Fathers, and the second was Captain Haldane, because you know, my previous employment running about a company-sized element full of living history actors on a battlefield, I had to try to pull from, you know, I was a non-commissioned officer in the Army. I was not a commissioned officer. So, you know, I was in charge of a half a dozen guys trying to keep them alive. So I couldn't even imagine from the company level being in charge of 200, 220, you know, riflemen in a company, that kind of stress for such a young guy. I mean, I turned 21 when I was overseas, right? And growing up, you know, watching documentaries about World War II vets going, oh, you know, we were just kids, you know, like, and when you're a kid watching it, you don't realize that until you come back and you're like, yeah, we were just kids, you know, in charge of all this stuff, you know. And so I think about now in my life now, how I would have handled things, which would have been a whole lot different. So it's easy to be an armchair quarterback a lot, but it just seems to me that you were the Haldane that I pictured. You know, everybody has a different leadership style. You know, some company commanders can, you know, they're in your face, they're yelling at you, you know, they got their first sergeants barking at you and everything. And that's the way they lead. And that's great. But I mean, I'm assuming you didn't serve in the military, and I apologize if I didn't know that ahead of time. I'm assuming you didn't serve. So your portrayal, you were a better officer than some of the ones I've served with, because I mean, there just wasn't enough of you in that series, because
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to put it into words, man. It just, when you talk to everybody listens.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when we're watching it. I mean, you're kind of hard to hear sometimes. You know, there's a lot of background noise, and you've just got that quiet confidence. I mean, you were just in charge. And you didn't need anything. You didn't need ranks. You didn't need a special weapon. And I get it. They had to put something on you. Sometimes they put mustaches on guys that never had mustache just because they don't have time for character development. You know, I get all that. But you just nailed it, man. You nailed it.
I very much appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you. You know, Andy went completely gray the last month of his life. So for me, I'm probably about 10 years older than most of the actors I was working with. That kind of helped.
Right.
To think about sending them into a situation where they'd be wounded or die, that really kind of played on me. So I knew he'd always want to be up front, as much as possible. I hadn't, you know, in 5, you don't see a lot of Andy, and then we shot 7, and we were setting up the scene where we're going up into the hills, the whole company, and because so they were putting gray in my hair in the makeup chair. So I was always the last one to show up because it took so long. And anyway, they had set up and rehearsed that scene where we go all the way up with the company. And I showed up, and the skipper, Dale Dye, was there. And I apologize, you know, skipper, you know, my apologies. I was in the chair. He's like, that makeup kit, don't worry about it. And he goes, you know, just Dale in his way. And he's like, all right, so I played you in the rehearsals, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to muster the company and move them up into the hills. So you're walking along here, and you know, weapons, move out, do this, you know. So he's kind of doing all that. In my head, I'm going, just like, yeah, I'm not doing that. No. But I didn't say anything to him. I didn't say anything to the director. And when I went back to set up, when we did the first shot, I was with Sergeant Bunch, and he was one of the cadre, one of the technical advisors, a Marine, and he was the first sergeant of the company. And I'm just sitting there, and I thought, well, how am I going to do this? And I looked at him, and I said, look, when they say action, he didn't have any lines or anything, right? He was, and I said, I'll ask you if the company's ready, and you just nod your head, and I'll say, move them out. And then I just walked. And that was it. So we filmed it a bunch of times, finished that sequence, moving on. I see Dale walking over towards me. And I thought, oh, fuck, what's he going to say? But I didn't think he was going to, you know, give me shit about it or anything. I'm thinking, what's he going to say? Because there were other periods, like in 5, when I first did stuff, you know, with Sledge in the tank trap, like, get your ass out of that hole, fucking come on, you know. And there was a lot of this sort of stuff, which I avoided. And he walked right up to me, and he said, Skipper, he called me Skipper all the time. He said, every officer has his own way of leading, and I respect that. Shook my hand and walked away. So yeah, from, you know, that gave me the confidence. But I just, you know, I knew I had to stick to that in terms of what I read, and Sledge's book, what everyone had to say about Andy, and he was just that guy, you know. He was just that guy, and as much as you felt you could act that, I just took all that away. I never tried to act any of that. I never tried to force anything. I just tried to allow it to happen, and you just see everything in this guy's eyes, and go from there. So I'm glad it worked out.
No, yeah, you definitely killed it. Yeah,
CO's got our orders. All right, here it is.
Yeah.
The entire division's moving across the airfield at 0900. First and second platoon will lead, followed by weapons and third platoon. The only way to stop this Jap artillery is to get into those hills. And the only way into those hills is across this airfield. When we move, do not stop until we get across. You got it?
Aye, Skipper.
Any questions?
We need water, Captain.
I'm working on it, Corporal. Get your gear ready and stand by.
Get back to your position. Pack it up.
Go, second squad. Let's get back online.
Let's go, rockets. Pack them up. Move it.
When it came to shooting that airport scene, and you guys are running through across the opening, and the pyrotechnics are going off in the background, and you see the body parts of the mannequins laying around, and the stuntmen who were told to fall at certain times. How kind of in the moment was that for you? How crazy was that scene going off all around you when you were shooting that?
I mean, the first few times you're doing it, it's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, it's intense. It's shocking. The very first scene I had when I was the tank trap, I run into the tank trap. And so I run in, say my stuff. And when they flip around to do the front view and the tank blows up, I jump in there, and they were just, my cue was for this to blow up. And I had the earplugs in and everything. So we go to, and we shoot, and the charge for it was late. So as I'm asking Hillbilly and trying to find a radio, I sort of stumbled that, because everything's all quiet. the first day on set, you haven't heard anything. And then when they roll all those explosions, they're all fake, obviously. And the weapons, I mean, it is, where's my left foot, which is my right foot? Like, what the fuck? And I messed it up. And it wasn't horribly bad or anything. And Carl was directing, so the tank blows up. But to reset and do that again, that pyro would have cost about $40,000. And it was good enough, but I got out of there and I'm sort of horrified, like, oh man, my very first shot, I fuck it up. Tony was brilliant. He's behind Carl. He's like, don't worry about it. We'll get it in editing. But I'm standing there and I look at Carl as he's rewatching, he's watching the replay, and he's in his chair and he's looking, and then he turns and he sees me and he goes,
busting your balls.
And I'm like, oh no, oh shit.
That would be like a 2-hour reset.
Yeah. And I mean, it turned out fine. But so by the time you get to the airfield, it was every time we had to shoot a sequence, we'd walk through it. And then there's all these markers, all these flags where the pyro are. So you knew, and you'd walk it and rehearse with camera. Then half run, and then full run. But when everything was lit up, like no acting required,
yeah.
And when we got to that building where the guy gets shot and I turn around and fire, kill him. That's the only time I fired my weapon in the show.
Really?
And Dale had that put in. So I arrived, and it wasn't in the dailies. It wasn't in the script, and we set up and explained to us, and he walks over to me and he's like, I got the skipper a kill. Nice. You needed to kill. So I talked him into doing this kind of, I mean, they agreed to it and everything like that. But yeah, that was the only time I fired.
I can imagine the calamity of sound around you. Can, obviously the scenes that you have a lot of dialogue, they set it, action, but in those scenes where there's a lot of gunfire, I can imagine the first few days it would be a little hard to hit your cues, because on a smaller, much obviously super smaller scale, being living historians, Jeff and I we're at public events where people don't realize that reenacting is kind of a small play. We have a planned out thing of what's supposed to happen, which way the guys are supposed to go, things are supposed to happen. And when you got 50, 60, 70 firearms around, you're shooting off blanks, and down here in Florida and some places else, we have tanks going off. And sometimes when you get all that sound going off and all the percussion blast and all that, sometimes it's hard to remember exactly where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. I can only imagine on a movie set with all those pyrotechnics, at least the first few takes, it would be hard to hit your cues and remember the exact dialogue, especially when they're supposed to be.
Yeah, first experienced it in the boot camp, and no, obviously no cameras around at that point. But one night, the two separate boot camps, the one I was in, which was about a month and a half later than the first one. And we had a exercise where you go up into these hills, they turn off the lights at the camp. Well, it's in the rainforest in Australia. So it's pitch black. I mean, you had to grab the guy's webbing in front of you to know he was there. And we get up to this landing part, and then we get attacked. So there's Freddie Joe Farnsworth and Sergeant Bunch were behind a 30 cal, and so it just lights up and you see them, and then it goes dark, and then we fire back. So guys, I had the carbine, guys with the M1, Tommy, a bar, and everything. It just light up, but all you could see was just these flashes. And I was with Lieutenant Stokey, who's Marine, like Marine correspondent. I believe he's similar to Dale. And I was with him the entire time doing boot camp. And he's standing there, and I'm behind him, and he says, Haldane. And I'm like, sir, LT behind you. And he didn't say anything. And I just kind of imagine that, I don't know, maybe if he had some kind of flashback reaction.
Sure.
Maybe just not that he was even necessarily thinking about it or scared, but some experience he had in Vietnam. Because on a different day when I was walking around with him and I'm asking him, maybe stupid actor questions about like, when you were in Vietnam, did you look up and find the Southern Cross and, mark your bearings and get your directions? And he's just standing there and he goes, I never looked up long enough. I'm like, yeah, of course, you're not going to sit there in the jungle and you're like, whack kind of thing. But so experience in boot camp, by the time you got to set and doing it, it was, you're a little adjusted to it. But I tell you, when that 50 cal went off, man, even though it's blanks, it wasn't as loud as everything else, or, the real deal. But, and then whenever to go off, cut, and then you'd hear Dale, he'd say, that's the sound of freedom.
Well, I'm sure you experienced it too with some of the tanks and that are going off. Once again, they're blanks, but still makes the sand bounce off your trousers, even though you're 50, 60 yards away. It puts off some muzzle blast. Henry, I think I stepped on your question you're getting ready to ask when I...
No, not at all, man. I'll dish this up for you guys. Have at it.
Well, I'm glad you brought the boot camp, because we all know that the Band of Brothers had the in-depth boot camp, and I was kind of wondering if the HBO of the Pacific had the same thing, and clearly you just kind of mentioned that it did. How long was the pre-filming boot camp to get you guys kind of cohesive and acting as one?
So for the guys that were in episode 1 and 2, minus John Bernfall, he was in mine. So their boot camp was, like I said, about a month and a half ahead of time. So they didn't want to bring everyone else and then have you sit around Australia. And theirs was 9 days, 8 or 9 days. And the one I was in was like 4 days. I think 4. Yeah, 4. Of course, we got all kinds of flack for, you guys only did 4 days. But when I showed up in Australia and hang out for a couple of days at the hotel, and then, I don't know, boot camp maybe the next day, and I'm walking back from town, I gone shopping, and there's this guy running along the path, and he's got the squared away hair and shades on, and I'm like, man, that guy must be in the show or something like that. He runs by me. I don't recognize him at all, never met him or anything like that. And he just smiles at me. He got this kind of shit-eating grin. I'm going, what the fuck was that? Cut to when I show up for boot camp, you get on the bus. Well, there he is, the guy who jogged past me the day before, smiling at me, is Freddie Joe Farnsworth. who was, and he didn't say anything to me. We got off the bus, got lined up, and Lieutenant Stokey gave us, a little talk, told us what was going on, and I was praying that I wouldn't get separated from the rest of the guys. But I kind of knew I might be, and then so we finished, and he said, Haldane, you're with me, everyone else over there. So I go up, starts talking to me, and he says, you're going to be with us. Get you set up in a tent behind the CP here, and you'll be with us the whole time. So I'm walking back there with him, and Freddie Joe, hi Freddie, if you're watching, and Gunny Whitlock were walking towards me, with the Stetson just pulled down perfectly at the brow there, and Freddie's just eyeballing me, and I, LT's talking. I have no idea what he's saying because Freddie and he gets about 3 feet away and he goes, "Going back to your bitch tent, bitch." And he spits tobacco right at my feet. That was the first thing he said to me. And, I got to admit, I did wet myself a little. I was like, oh God, and then I spent 3 days in CP with them and they barely said a word to me. But without that boot camp, without having that, without the cadre, without those guys training us, it never would have been close to what it was, obviously.
So did they have you?
Kudos to them.
Did they have you sleeping in a wall tent? And everybody else was in pup tents because of your rank, or were you in a pup tent as well?
I was in a pup tent, but they had someone set it up for me.
I didn't.
But it was right. The CP, they had this big tent, I think a wooden floor, and they had cots, and a bar and a jacuzzi and a fridge. No, they didn't have any of that, but my tent was set up right behind them, which was right at the edge of the forest. And of course, Australia, you're thinking snakes, spiders, there's so many ways to die. And I get in there at night and I'm exhausted and everything, but I didn't take off any of my uniform. I left the gaiters on. I didn't want anything crawling in my pants. The carbine was right, by my leg, and the tent flap was open. I was ready to go, and I heard something rustling around in this forest like that. What is that? A wild boar or something like that? Like, what the fuck is that? I didn't have any special treatment because they ignored me the entire time. And I only had 4 days. So Stokey, he told the other guys to just, hey, ease off, he's mine. It was a lot to take in 4 days. So I studied him. Like, there's a good part of Lieutenant Stokey in Haldane, because he was similar that way. Never raised his voice. When he did, you knew it. Firm but fair. Very, very decent guy, and you could tell he just cared so much about everyone that was with him. So I would thank God. I was able to take that with me. And then Dale showed up the second day, I think. So you're meeting Dale Dye. You're like, oh, Dale Dye, man, amazing. So he gives us a talk, and he comes by to talk to me afterwards, and forget exactly what he said. But, you're in boot camp, you're a lieutenant, or your rank underneath when you graduate. So I was Lieutenant Haldane. Freddie Joe, I don't know. Can you swear on the show? I guess I already did.
Yeah. We're full equal opportunity cussers here. So have at it.
Yeah. No, Freddie kind of had a name for everybody, and I was Lieutenant Dick Licker.
That's fantastic.
Hey, Dick. Can I do a good Freddie? Dick Licker, get over here, learn something. But when I met Dale, and he's like, "All right, Lieutenant Haldane, see you on set," kind of thing, and shakes my hand, and I said, I don't know why I said this, but I went, "It's Captain, sir." And as the words are coming out of my mouth, I'm like, "Oh, fuck! Why did you say that?" And he's still holding my hand, and he squeezes it just even tighter and pulls me in a bit. And he goes, "Not till I say yar, God damn it." And lets go of my hand and walks away. So, yeah, I was a little shaken by that, but I made it through.
We do have a text question. I was a little caught off. I actually had to do some Googling here, but you kind of already answered. Said for Scott, was Freddie's boot camp as tough as he makes it sound? Jacqueline Basilone.
Oh, Jacqueline, yeah.
So did Scott have such a hard time as you did? Or was his as bad as he made it sound, or was he being a little more dramatic?
Oh,
I'm sorry. No, she was asking for Scott. Was Freddie's boot camp as tough as he made it sound?
I'm assuming she means how he ran it. Or is she talking about another person? He was hard, but he was fair. If you just shut your mouth and did your thing, you were okay. But he was still going to find a way to get under your grill a bit, see what you're made of, kind of thing. And I grew up playing all kinds of sports, guys yelling at me and saying you're no good and all that thing. So, the way he's doing it, it has an effect on you. There were some actors in there that had a real hard time with it. But there wasn't anything that wasn't fair, and if you knew what was going on and you absorbed that experience, you were okay. Guys that rolled their eyes or had a problem with it or said anything, that was a problem. It just kind of made it worse for everybody else.
Yeah, I guess I can imagine, based on a person's background, whether they were in sports like you were saying, or if maybe somebody was not so much and maybe did a lot of drama club and didn't get yelled at a lot in their childhood, that being in that environment for the first time might have caught them a little off guard, or maybe thought, oh, they're just being over dramatic. But the whole purpose of that boot camp is to get you in that mindset so that when you're doing the series, you're in that mindset and to make you look more soldiery and make you look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, we do PT and I wasn't in great shape. So, 2 miles, drop, do the push-ups, the sit-ups for 2 minutes, run back. I was gassed coming back, and I'm supposed to be leading. So I'm waving guys like, yeah, go ahead. It's okay. Go ahead. All right, no problem. Some guy was puking and my legs were just burnt. I could barely get back to the camp. And I got back there and Gunny Whitlock, he was like, Haldane, Gunny, go over to him. And, he didn't read me the riot act. He's just saying, you're the leader, you got to lead and you got to be in the front. And I didn't tell him anything about my fucked up knee or anything like, I just, yes, Gunny, yes. Yeah, got it. No problem. They break you down. It was hard for sure. I'd have liked to have been in the longer boot camp. And like I say, these, Freddie and Gunny Whitlock and Sergeant Punch and Stokey at night around the CP, they did not say a word to me. Well, I wasn't in any part of the conversation or anything like that, which is fine. But when we finished and you graduate and they come to, Lieutenant Stokey salutes and then Freddie saddles up. I think Stokey pinned the Eagle Woman anchor on you. And, Freddie had been calling me Dick Licker for 3 days. And so Buddy salutes. He's like, Captain Haldane, and I salute him. And as soon as he called me Captain Haldane, I felt myself tearing up.
Oh, damn.
I was just, the Gunny loves me. You know what I mean? You get that. And then I, became good friends with him. But afterwards, he's like, yeah, man, I saw you tear up. It's like, fuck yeah, I admit it.
You're talking about the lack of PT. I think even if you're out running 2 miles before production in a pair of Brooks or some Saucony's, boondockers aren't known for their ankle support or arch support. So even making that transition where you're running in boondockers, if you don't have the leggings on, they are very, out of all of the American Ally footwear, between the rough outs, the jump boots, and then the Marine Corps boondockers, especially if you got stuck with some that were provided by the fine people of At What Price Glory, they did not have a lot of support to them. So I can only imagine trying to run 2 miles in those things.
I thought they were fake. I'm like, are these what they wore? I couldn't believe what they wore. These, that type of footwear and essentially pajamas. And your webbing, it amazed me. They, for the production, I had the gaiters on the whole time, and around Peleliu, I'm even with the heat when we were filming in Australia, I kind of appreciated it because you're, on any sort of shrub or rock or anything like that, it just, you get big cuts on your calf or something like that. Maybe it might sound trivial or you're like a bit of a baby or something like that, but I didn't mind kind of having that extra protection at that time. And I just, like I said, man, I can't believe what they had, you see, for their kit and say with band and the paratroopers, what they had, obviously completely different environment and everything like that. But
yeah, just thin cotton. And Jeff and I have talked about this in the past when it comes to the European theater. I tell people, on D-Day, they landed in essentially their church clothes. They had on wool pants, wool shirt. Some even had a tie, a cotton jacket. And the only thing that made it a combat uniform was the rifle, the webbing, the helmet, and the gaiters or the leggings. Other than that, they landed in Normandy on what their parents and friends were wearing back home to work in church every day. It was amazing, the uniforms and how basically rudimentary they were.
Yeah, well, in terms of how they dress them, as the episodes go on, they're broken down more and more. So I had the one I was wearing and then a spare that were basically identical, but you're wearing them the entire time, right? So this is 6 months of filming.
Yeah.
And they can't wash them. I mean, they clean them in some sort of deodorizer, but I tell you, my blouse could have got up and walked away from Australia on its own by the end of it. I mean, it was just like, it was, I'm sure they burnt it afterwards. It was horrifying.
Jeff, it's all you, friend.
Oh man, I'm just absorbing. I'm I think about all of the stuff that we wore and the complaints, when we first got the outer tactical vest, the OTVs, and then the big sappy plates that you'd have to wear front and back and everything, and we were issued those about 6 months before we went over. And I just remember guys going, oh my gosh, like, you can't move. You feel like you're just so restricted. And, this is before I started in the World War II field, reenacting. And it's like two opposite ends of the spectrum, because, wearing just the HBTs or P41s, whatever, you think about, God, I can't believe I was complaining about having to wear all of that, because, when the metal hits the meat, like you're saying, you want as much protection as possible. So yeah, it's incredible thinking about what the average, infantryman wears today on the battlefield, as opposed to, like Don was saying, is just a set of wools or, the HBTs. It blows you away. You at least had a little bit of confidence that what you were wearing was gonna, had some ballistic protection, and they did. They would stop an AK round or something like that, the plates. But yeah, that's why we do what we do, because that generation is just something special. Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, you think of the dysentery, you think of the malaria. These guys, it's right. The 9 months they spent in Australia after Guadalcanal, and 90% of them had malaria. Andy talked about that in his letters, and even the extra stuff that I had, like the bag for the map. And, I think, my runner would have had that. I was comfortable with the carbine. I didn't, I had to have the glasses and, all this stuff. And I just thought maneuvering that kind of stuff sort of got in the way for what I wanted to do. But everything else there weren't much to it. Yeah. And you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier too. I was going to talk a little bit about it, with not exactly firing your weapon as much as the guys that you're leading, and that was a problem. And, and Don was a volunteer for me at the old battlefield. And, guys just love squeezing the trigger. It's fun, popping brass. And, but there's a limit, and I would tell some of these guys, like, hey, I thought you were one of my squad leaders. Why are you black on ammo before we even hit the main line of resistance? Oh man, you just need to issue us more ammo. Like, no, you need to get busy leading these guys, not squeezing the trigger all the time. And, I would come off with, and I ran with a Thompson, and it's hard to keep your shot count down with a weapon that's 600 to 800 rounds a minute. But typically end of this 10 to 15 minute per trail, I shot about 30 rounds, half a magazine. Then I would do a mandatory mag change, things like that. Cause you're just too busy. And like I said, Don was there, and you've seen, you kind of know what it's like to be in a scene like coming across the airfield with what we used to do over there with the pyrotechnics and the special effects and everything going off, and smoke choking you out, and tanks rolling in front of you and everything going on. So, I had the M1 in boot camp, not the carbine. So training with that initially, and then, learning to run and change a mag. Mm-hmm. with an M1. Fuck. Like, are you kidding me?
And not get him one thumb.
I got no thumbs left. But right, they're so good at how we were trained that by the time you came to film, you just didn't think about any of that stuff. It was second nature, and you were more concerned about that than you were about acting. For a lot of us, we wanted the Marines. We were fighting for them in a way, in a sense, say as actors, that you look to Dale or you look to Freddie in terms of, did I do this right? Not about your line or your character or anything like that. Like, essentially, we forgot about all that stuff, and we're just trying to be as accurate as possible. And I think the characters for most everybody just came out of that, and that was a good thing, because you you weren't thinking about getting an Academy Award or anything like that. You're just like, fuck, I got to load this right, or I'm going to look like an idiot, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I wanted to talk to you about the most, for sure, because the last film production I was on, I had a bit part in it, but I was mainly brought on as the advisor, and of course costume design, because I had to do all the uniforms and the web gear and all that stuff. But that was small independent film stuff, and I may be getting into a larger production over the next 2 years, another World War II film, but coming on as the advisor, and it's a little intimidating to go from indie film level to very large production level overseas. And that was one thing I really wanted to ask is, from that perspective, I know guys like Freddie and of course Dale died, the one and only. But yeah, how much interaction the actors really had, because there must be a fine line between, you can't fire this actor. This guy's got the part. So you can't just like, you're out of here. Give me somebody else that knows how to work this weapon. You can't do that. So I'm just enjoying hearing, from your perspective, the amount of respect that these guys garnered right off the bat, from the actors that, you've got this part, you're going to have this job. You're Captain Haldane, whatever they do. I would imagine there's a sense of, stability that, you're the guy, but they've got to be able to drill you to a certain point too, to really bring that out of you. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Dale, there were 2 units shooting at the same time, different episodes. And I was with the blue unit. So Dale was with my unit, and Lieutenant Stokey was with red unit, and Freddie was with red. So I didn't see him much when we were filming. Here and there when things sort of crossed over. So Dale was in my ear the whole time. He had me promote background enlisted guys. He'd pull me aside and say, this is all part of the process, and we're, for the morale of these guys, and these background guys were right into it. And he'd say, well, that's good Johnson, or he's getting promoted today, and I want you to do that, and so line them up, and I'm going to come in and promote them, and I'd never done any of that. And we're filming the episode, and again, I think Bunch was with me, so I just I turned to him, and I'm like, what the fuck do I do here? Hey, I tell you what, why don't you, I'll just say to you, muster the troops and get together and put them on. These background guys, the A Corps, they did the boot camp. They did a phenomenal job. But I'd go to the washroom or go to the truck to get something to eat, and guys would be Captain Haldane saluting me. All the time. Never was I called Scott, maybe by a director or something like that. Dale called me Skipper or Haldane all the time. And that was a great comfort to me to have him around all the time, because you sort of knew if you were getting things right. Directors, they're not really, they'll ask you to do a scene again or maybe change something a little bit differently, but their mind is, so many other things to think about. So it was great. I think he calls me Skipper to this day.
That's awesome.
Freddie calls me other things.
Well, like I said, man, at the beginning of the show, you really nailed it. And, looking at pictures of Captain Haldane, he wasn't the best looking guy, which is, obviously why you qualified for it. I'd have definitely, they'd have had to ugly this up, but
it messed me up. Yeah.
Throw one on you, man. No, well done. Are we gonna have time to talk a few books, or
we can get into a few books real quick. Scott was talking about his P-41. He had 2 pairs, and after 6 months they were so muddy and dirty, and I'm thinking it took me 6 years of not washing mine to get the sweat stains in the right spot and actually getting the holes in the right spot. Half the reenactors and living historians would love their uniform to probably look as bad and scuzzy as yours looked after you're done filming, because one of the biggest criticisms guys will get when they post pictures on Facebook is your uniform's too clean, which is true, but I can't bring myself to artificially weather my uniform. So like every sweat stain on here,
Don, hang it up in a tree outside.
I
And
can't
leave
do it. I can't do it. This has 6 years of Florida and Alabama sun on it. All the holes in here are from thorns and everything, and all the sweat stains in the right spot. And I will say this, one of my bucket list things was to do an amphibious landing from a landing craft. And 3 or 4 years ago, we did the 75th anniversary reenacting in Fort Morgan, Alabama. And we were supposed to have 2 landing crafts, but due to the hurricane, the guy who owned one of those landing crafts worked on an oil rig. He couldn't get it out of dry dock quick enough for inspections, for insurance, yada, yada, yada. We still did a landing off of 1 landing craft. And that was amazing and a bucket list filler. And when we were making that mile ride from the marina down to the landing area where we did our landing for the wave 1 and then wave 2 and 3 came in. And it was really just put yourself in that position. You know, being a World War II amateur historian, or reading all the books and seeing all the pictures of guys coming down landing crafts and the first view photos you see, and then actually being on there and running down that ramp and seeing how slippery it is. I can only imagine what it was like for the guys filming the Guadalcanal scenes and some of the other amphibious landing scenes where you have more than 1 landing craft coming in, and just doing that for that production had to be just completely mind-blowing to be stacked in those and actually having more than just 1 out there. I can only imagine how fun that would have been on those days.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you couldn't see a damn thing. They're diesel.
Yep.
So the smell of it, you know, rocket in there. You know, there were guys puking, just filming it. I trained in it, but then when we came to shoot the landing, I was not in the picture vehicle, which really, I'm like, Haldane's not going to be the first guy off the Amtrak. Like, what the fuck, you know? But just because of the way they were shooting it, the narrative, and had to be on sledge. But I was pretty disappointed by that he wasn't the first guy over. But you know, obviously couldn't do anything about it. But
sure,
he'd have been the front. You know, he'd have been the first guy over there for sure.
Well, I think it's that time of the podcast where we're going to talk about a few books before we wrap it up, and then we'll give a farewell to Scott and all the final wrap-up stuff. But Jeff, you know, sadly, I've been so busy, I'm still reading the same Peleliu book. I'm almost done with it, which, interestingly enough, in that Peleliu Tragic Triumph, there's a lot of quotes from your father in there, Henry, from like letters where people asking him questions about commanders and stuff. We'll get into in a later episode. But Jeff, since you brought it up, what book are you currently reading?
Well, it's actually, I'm just about to finish it up. It's the same one I talked about the last episode that I did with you guys. But I came across something in here that I think is extremely relevant to current events today. And just to set the tone, this book is about 5 B-17 bomber crewmen that kind of all lived in the same area in Connecticut. And this guy just kind of started meeting these guys at like a reunion breakfast and wanted to get their stories in print. So this guy's not like a big time author really, but did a really good job with this. And this one particular B-17 navigator was flying, bombing a target in northern Italy. And just as they started the bomb run, direct hit by flak. So they haven't dropped their bombs yet. And literally comes to, the aircraft completely exploded. He literally comes to flailing through the air at approximately 15,000 feet and just hurling towards the Alps below. And as he comes to, you know, of course, what the heck just happened kind of thing. You know, he's trying to get his bearings. He's flying through the air and he remembers he still has a parachute on. So he remembers to try to grab the ripcord. And just as he goes to grab the ripcord, he smacks into the Alps. And they were so covered with snow that it actually helped pad the landing. This guy fell 15,000 feet into the Alps, into the snow, and lived to talk about it. He had some broken bones. He was pretty messed up, but alive enough to be taken to a Stalag, a POW camp in Austria, just across the border. So he's sitting there, and they treat him fairly good. You know, there's some English-speaking nurses that are kind of helping him out. There's a couple other wounded German enlisted guys that kind of help him go to the bathroom and everything. You know, at that point, they're just men that are fighting. It's not about whose side, right? Well, this German officer comes in and who also speaks really good English, and they just kind of talk different things from different perspectives. And I just thought this was incredible. The German officer looks over to him and he says, quote, "When are you Americans going to realize that the real enemy is the Russians? Why do you not just join us and we will defeat the Russians together?" And I thought that was pretty prophetic. That was January of 1945 that this guy has this conversation with a German officer. Wow. And look at where we are today. And I got one in the mail today. I ordered this because this has to potentially do with my new film project about the Pathfinders at D-Day. I opened it just briefly. This is incredible. I mean, I can't believe this isn't more. I mean, you know, I've got Harlan Glenn stuff and Matthew Bianchi and guys like that for that reference uniform and gear material, but this is incredible. And I wanted to bring that up because if any of our listeners have any other information about Pathfinders and Eureka beacons, I'd be really interested because that's going to be my life probably for the next 2 years. And then real quick, and I'll turn it over to Henry. I mentioned this to you guys the other day. I came to work and, Scott, I'm a high school teacher right now. My goal is to be teaching high school history in the next year or so. So I'm finishing my bachelor's degree. And I get to work one day and two of my colleagues in the history department, I had mentioned I'm trying to collect everything I can about, bomber boys. I'm a big bomber, B-17 8th Air Force guy, right? I want to try to collect all this stuff. And they came across something and they showed me. I said, "Oh, that's pretty neat. I've never seen one in person." And about a week later, they purchased it for me. They bought it for me. So this is an issued survival bolo knife.
Wow.
With the sheath on it. Yeah. So it was a foldable, collapsible survival bolo. And it's just, there's cool. Only like 2 known makers, I think, that were made during the war. So it's pretty small. I mean, it fits in my musette bag with all my other goodies. But I was just blown away because, that thing was not cheap. And I just,
yeah. Spent your allowance.
And it's in great condition, too.
They bought it for me. I mean, that's what was, yeah. Oh, it's in incredible condition. So that was really cool. And one of those guys lost his uncle on his 25th mission over Berlin. So he just really appreciates the fact that I just, am really connected with it. So for him to gift that to me was really cool. So that's my show and tell tonight.
Nice.
Henry?
Yeah, I'm about 200 pages into Richard Frank's Tower of Skulls. So that's my current reading project. That is not a quick read.
Is it like number 5 font?
No, but it is not written at the 6th grade level, which I would be more comfortable with. But.
How about you, Scott? What do you do in your leisure reading? Are you a World War II guy? Are you a fiction guy? How do you fulfill your freedom and your spare time? Are you a reader for that matter? I guess would be the first question. Other than reading scripts.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Actually, a buddy of mine was cleaning out the basement at his old place, and his old man kept all these Playboy magazines.
Nice.
From late 70s, 80s, and the interviews in them. I mean, I know everyone says that, and it's like, hey, I mean, I don't mind the pictures either, but there are some fantastic interviews in there with all kinds of, people in the arts and everything else. So I was recently just, leafing through a bunch of those. And then, I wanted to show you that I mentioned before. I forget who told me about this, but the Marines Leatherneck magazine. This is from January 1945. Got it off of eBay.
It's a beautiful cover.
And this is the one that lists Andy Haldane as killed in action. And I think that was Mitch. That told me about this. So I went on to eBay there, and it was like $40 or something like that. All the old ads and articles and everything that was going on at the time. Just fantastic.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I have a few Life magazines around here from the 40s. And you read the articles, and you would think 80 years isn't that long ago. Grammar and dictation and the use of the English language couldn't have changed. Holy hell. You read some of those articles, and you're like, is this Old English? I mean, just the word, the phrases, just the literally the grammar they use has changed. We've dumbed it down so much, especially in the internet age. But just some of those articles, like I would get these ideas like, oh, I'm going to read some of these articles on the podcast and do like pre-recorded monologues. And I'm like suffering through them. Like they're super long, and just their use of the English language has changed so much over the last 80 years. You wouldn't think it has, but it has dramatically.
Absolutely. That's, half the time we do these things with Henry, I can't understand what he's saying because he uses all the big words.
Well, him and Jeff are definitely the smart one on this show. I'm the one who kind of, they're the ones like, are we texting a fifth grader about our show? Because I was born in Kentucky, grew up in Ohio, moved to California. Now I've been living in Florida for all these years. So my accent's just completely effed. And so with my accent and my speech impediment, and I'm driving down the road doing voice to text, Google just makes up shit and puts it in there. And I can only imagine, like, what the?
Henry and I are like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be sitting at work and I'll get this message. What the hell is he talking about?
I think us Southerners and us people with speech impediments, we need a class action lawsuit against Google and Apple for their horrible dictation on their voice to speech. We're told to use voice to text when driving, go hands free, and as an IT guy, if I'm not behind someone's computer at their office, I'm driving to the next one. And so I spend all day driving and trying to use voice to text, and it's just a goddamn nightmare. It's horrible, and I feel so bad for them, but it is. If to be honest with, if I typed it out with my learning disability, it wouldn't be much better. So, but yeah, it's painful.
Maybe where'd you get the cover?
This is reproduction P44. It looks nice and salty because once again, I've worn it in the Florida sun for the last 6 years. And it used to be nice and dark on the inside, but it's got the rust spots and all that. And I wore it just for you. I usually wear my P41 because I like to wear my P41 in public, but because I never served, I don't like wearing this one in public because I don't want to offend real Marines because I'm wearing an EGA. So I wore it tonight just since you're coming on the show. But yeah, I usually wear my P41 and over my shoulder. One of the things I do since I don't wash my uniforms, but I don't want them to stink, after I do an event, I have a mannequin here and I just put the uniform on there to air out. If I were to rotate my camera over the shoulder, I'd have one of my uniforms here. But yeah, I got P41, P42s and all that stuff. And so from time to time, when I'm out and about in public, I'll wear one of my soft covers or something. But yeah, I put this guy on today. I really wish my P41 was this salty, but it's only a couple months old.
I obviously wasn't able to take the blouse I wore, but so the things that I wore, two things that I wore were the dog tags, which I have, and the watch.
Nice.
Which is the only one with the Eagle Globe and Anchor on it. And I was trying to take this my last day. I'm walking away to the trailer and Props runs up to me and I had it in my pocket. And I think she probably looked for it back in where we were changing. And of course she says, look, you can keep everything. Keep the tags, but we need the watch. I'm like, fuck. All right. So I give back. And then I was on an email chain with some other guys. And when I got back to Canada and I put this bounty on it. I said, hey, we all know where we all know where everything is. And I forget what the prize, the money was, but if anyone gets their hands on it or can find it, never expected to get it. But all of a sudden, one of the Australian guys writes to me and he says, what's your address? Gave him my address and then he says, the Eagle has landed.
Fantastic.
And about 2 weeks later, he sent me the watch. I just got a text from Freddie and I was saying Whitlock, but it's Whitfield. Bruce Whitfield, Gunny Whitfield. Thanks, Freddie. What would I do without? What would I do without Freddie? This is his company, by the way, Devil Dogs. I don't get any money for this. Certainly not from Freddie, but
well, shout out to Freddie for making a quality hat. So many people, they want to give out free hats or whatever to promote their company, and then they put on such a piece of shit hat that no one wears it. It ends up in their closet. So shout out for him for actually putting his logo on a quality hat that you're happy to wear, because otherwise no one would see it.
Absolutely. The people love this. Hey, get him on the show, man. I mean, he's Band of Brothers, Pacific. He's the only guy that acted in both of them. His wee part there.
Well, it's funny because when you mentioned his name earlier, I Googled it, and the image that comes up on IMDb is him in the Band of Brothers uniform. I was like, wait a minute. I'm like scrolling through. I was like, was he in both? Was he the only one who did both? We would love to have him on.
Oh, he's a great guest. He's foul mouth.
We don't care. All of our podcasts come with the explicit content warning on it.
He just has a little trouble figuring out the technical part of it. You know, when he sets up and trying to get the audio, the Wi-Fi on. You know, other than that,
I can walk him through it. I'm an IT guy.
He's a great guest and such a big part of the whole thing, and a good friend, all around good shit.
Now, I know you recently had 2 appearances on The Mayor of Kingstown, which is currently streaming on Amazon Prime and Paramount Plus. Do you have any? You want to talk about that, or do you have any other projects coming down the pike you want to plug or get into?
Yeah, that's geez, I forget when they aired, but I'm actually going to be going to some D-Day events in Normandy. I got invited. The World War II Foundation, run by Tim Gray. And out of the blue, a couple of days ago, he messaged me and he says, "Hey, you know, do you want to go to France and be a part of this?" I think they've gone maybe the last 10 years, 11 years, he said, and this may be the last one. There is a few vets. So over, say, like June 3rd to the 10th, a bunch of different events. There's a film festival, placing a wreath at Winter's statue. And Kyle is going. Kyle Chandler.
Nice.
He is going. He's a good friend of Tim's. And he was in Mayor Kingstown, the first episode. He's Jeremy Renner's brother in that.
Oh, okay.
So a bunch of the cast, the Band of Brothers guys are going there. So I've never been. I went to theater school in England, but didn't get over to the continent. So really looking forward to that, to go into that and have that experience.
Yeah, we'll have to track you down afterwards. You have to come back on and give us a replay of the events that went down over there during that. That'd be a nice first-hand account for us to have you share with us. Okay, now we know
absolutely.
We know Henry usually has a long list of appearances coming up, so I'll get with Jeff next. Jeff, you got an event at the museum coming up in what, 2 weeks?
Yeah, Saturday the 19th. We open this museum to the public and reopen to the public, and then we've got our annual air show. So I linked up with a girl a few years ago who has, and I'm working to get her on as a guest as well with her organization. She's traveled the world with World War II vets, battlefields from Normandy to Iwo. She's basically in the San Antonio area. She's pretty close to me. So she's trying to organize about a half a dozen World War II vets to come out. I think I mentioned you guys that Colonel Joe McPhail is coming out. He's 100 years old now, and I've met him a few times. He's awesome. He flew Corsairs off Okinawa with the Death Rattlers VMF 322, and then again in Korea. So he's always just a treat to have at an air show or just anywhere. Got Liberty Jump Team coming out to display some of their stuff, and of course my reenacting unit, Company B. We're about 25 strong now to do some weapon demos, and you know, with our singing Dillard Sisters live and A-10 Warthogs blowing stuff up at the end, and World War II aircraft. We got a MiG-17 sitting in the hangar right now that just flew in today. So all kinds of good stuff happening over the next 2 weeks for sure. Yeah.
Now we've got 110 minutes, and I got to get at least one bad pun in. You just said you guys are from Company B. Do you have a Bugle Woogie Boogie Boy?
Yeah, you're it. Let's go.
Well, much like the real Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, I can't keep time without a band, so you'll definitely have to go out and draft the band. Okay, Henry, it's up to you. What do you got on the calendar coming up next?
Well, probably the next thing we're going to do is Scott, Matt, Saul, David. We're going to do a part 3 of the We Happy Few podcast, which we just did part 2 Saturday. That should upload like tomorrow, Scott, I guess, usually Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
March 17th, I'm going to be on War Stories with Preston Stewart. He emailed me after we had him as a guest. And the only other thing I'll say is World War II Magazine told me they're going to publish my article that I wrote, so I'm pretty stoked about that.
Yes, sir. We're all excited. You were talking about that the other day. You'll definitely have to keep us up to date when that comes out.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I would be remiss not to tell everybody, if you want to support us here at the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, do two things. One, you can head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com and click on the Patreon link. If you are on a mobile device, such as a cell phone and or a tablet, you may have to scroll down to the bottom of the page to find that orange Patreon link. It is $1 a month. You can support the show that way. Or as we were talking about before we went on the air, talking with Henry, we do have fantastic t-shirts like my K-Ration Dinner shirt that I'm wearing, or the WTSP logo shirt that Jeff is wearing, and you can order those directly off our website. Use the promo code ILISTEN, and that'll save you a couple bucks. But for myself, Jeff Copsetta, Henry Sledge, and the one and only Scott Gibson, we want to thank each and every one of you for hanging out with us for tonight's episode, and we will happily talk to you all next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.